Heads up, Toyota is recalling more than a dozen models of their vehicle.
Toyota's biggest secret just burst into the open, and every driver on the road is about to feel it. An ex-employee has revealed the scam Toyota spent years hiding. So how deep do these lies go inside Toyota's leadership? Why were catastrophic failures ignored? And what happens to the engines already on the road? The whistleblower who broke Toyota's silence. Toyota did not stumble into crisis. It detonated the moment a former engine specialist exposed the scheme hiding inside the company's own test labs. He revealed that leadership approved engines they knew could fail under ordinary driving stress. And the revelations landed like a hammer on the automaker's carefully crafted image. According to him, critical durability tests were shortened, heat cycle failures were ignored, and internal warnings were scrubbed from final reports before executives reviewed them. He claimed this was not oversight, but instruction. A cost-saving directive framed as efficiency, even though engineers repeatedly argued the design was unstable. His testimony cut through years of polished marketing and forced the public to confront a truth Toyota never expected to surface. The company's most trusted engines were greenlit with defects baked into their architecture. The leak spread fast, igniting panic inside executive offices and outrage among drivers who had trusted Toyota for generations. But his claims were only the spark, because the true damage appeared when investigators stepped into the testing rooms themselves. What they found overturned every reassurance Toyota had offered, because the numbers recorded by the machines painted a story far darker than any executive admission. And the silence that followed from the upper floors showed unmistakably that the whistleblower's warnings were not exaggerations, but the first crack in a collapsing foundation. Investigators knew the truth was finally undeniable anyway. And the deeper investigators dug, the more Toyota's internal evidence began contradicting Toyota's own public story. Inside Toyota's engine labs, suspicion hardened into certainty as technicians replayed test runs that refused to match the company's public claims. Engines that should have survived extended heat cycles collapsed earlier than expected, while calibration sequences drifted so far from baseline that some engineers thought the instruments were malfunctioning. But the machines were functioning perfectly. It was the data that failed to behave, revealing stress patterns impossible to reconcile with Toyota's official durability narrative. Technicians documented pressure irregularities, inconsistent lubrication flow, and noise signatures that signaled deep structural instability, each one pointing toward a design pushed past its limits. Some attempted to halt the program, warning their supervisors that repeated failures across identical test scenarios indicated a systemic flaw, rather than isolated errors. Yet every recommendation to pause development was redirected to productivity teams, who insisted deadlines mattered more than anomalies that could be explained later. As uncertainty spread, a small group of engineers archived raw data privately, convinced that the company would remove or rewrite results before external reviewers ever saw them. Their fears proved justified when independent investigators later compared internal logs to the results Toyota submitted for certification, and discovered the gaps between them were not minor inconsistencies, but deliberate omissions that fundamentally altered the engine's measured reliability. From that moment forward, suspicion inside the lab became certainty that the truth had been intentionally buried. Engineers understood everything, and once the truth inside the labs became undeniable, attention turned toward the people who buried those warnings. If you want the full truth behind how this engine scandal spiraled this far, make sure you like the video, subscribe for the next update, and share your thoughts below. Buried emails and blocked reports. Betrayal defined the atmosphere inside Toyota's leadership corridors, as leaked communications exposed how executives redirected, softened, or entirely erased reports that highlighted the engine's structural weaknesses. Engineers had submitted detailed analyses warning that the design failed crucial stress thresholds. But senior managers responded by asking teams to adjust the language so it aligned with projected production goals. Several memos revealed executives urging rapid approval despite unresolved concerns, insisting that delays would harm market momentum more than the defects themselves. Risk assessments meant to guide long-term safety decisions were quietly shelved And in some cases, report versions containing harsher conclusions disappeared from internal archives without explanation. The most troubling evidence showed managers instructing teams to maintain a positive narrative, even when data contradicted it, transforming legitimate engineering warnings into perceived obstacles to executive ambition. Some engineers attempted to escalate their findings through alternative channels, but those attempts stalled as committee reviews were postponed and responsibilities were shuffled to dilute accountability. The atmosphere grew tense as technical staff realized that leadership's priority was not solving the defect, but preserving the illusion of control long enough to keep production uninterrupted, a strategy that deepened the divide between engineers bound to evidence and executives bound to quarterly forecasts. Internal tensions escalated quickly, and managers chose the path that protected deadlines rather than truth, forcing the company toward concealment long before the public learned anything at all. And with leadership choosing concealment over correction, the next move Toyota made became its most dangerous: the corporate fix that was never meant to fix anything. Anger erupted across Toyota's engineering floors when leadership unveiled a so-called fix that insiders immediately recognized as a calculated disguise rather than a real solution. Instead of redesigning flawed components, executives approved calibration changes that softened visible symptoms without addressing the underlying instability that test data had repeatedly exposed. Service departments received revised specifications, instructing technicians to interpret borderline readings as acceptable, a directive that reassured customers temporarily while shielding Toyota from immediate liability. Behind the scenes, some engineers protested that the changes merely delayed inevitable failures, but their objections were dismissed as impractical obstacles to the production schedule. Executives framed the change as responsible oversight, but insiders knew it was meant to push failures past warranty limits. Toyota shifted from mistake to concealment, rewriting records and scripts to hide a defect the fix never solved, only the story. And when that story cracked, the reckoning began. Regulators storm in. The moment regulators stepped into the picture, fear rippled through Toyota's upper ranks. Certification bodies that had long trusted the company's reputation suddenly demanded unfiltered access to engine data, internal testing records, and plant inspection logs. Agencies across multiple regions launched coordinated reviews, after early findings suggested that Toyota's certification submissions contained inconsistencies, echoing earlier international scandals involving diesel and emissions testing. What had once been routine compliance checks transformed into full-scale investigations backed by government authority rather than simple procedural oversight. Inspectors arrived at facilities unannounced, requesting raw sensor outputs rather than the summarized charts Toyota traditionally provided. They questioned why certain durability tests had been repeated unusually often, and why specific calibration runs appeared incomplete. Some inquiries even asked Toyota to reproduce test conditions on the spot, expecting identical results that never fully materialized. As discrepancies mounted, regulators froze several certification renewals pending clarification, a move that threatened production timelines and export schedules. For the first time, Toyota could no longer control the narrative. The more regulators uncovered, the more they suspected that internal issues extended far beyond isolated testing anomalies. Their reports hinted at systemic flaws in oversight, documentation, and verification. And with regulatory pressure intensifying, affected customers began recognizing that their own experiences were part of something much larger. That recognition drove them toward the only arena where Toyota could no longer ignore them, from angry drivers to national class actions. As owners realized their engine failures mirrored one another with unsettling precision, anger transformed into coordinated legal action. Individual complaints that once seemed disconnected rapidly converged into organized class movements, stretching across multiple states and regions. Attorneys representing early plaintiffs discovered that the failures followed nearly identical timelines, identical symptoms, and identical denial patterns. What began as scattered frustration soon evolved into a national mobilization, driven by the belief that Toyota's customers had been systematically misled. Law firms collaborated to gather sworn affidavits from drivers whose vehicles failed shortly after warranty expiration, many describing the same abrupt loss of power or unexplained internal damage. Technical experts hired by legal teams reviewed available evidence and raised serious doubts about Toyota's public explanation of the failures. Their reports cited patterns consistent with design flaws rather than random mechanical wear. With every new affidavit collected, the argument for class certification grew more persuasive. Court filings demanded that Toyota release internal documents, testing logs, and communications related to the disputed engines. Plaintiffs argued that these materials would show a clear gap between what engineers reported and what the company allowed to reach consumers. Judges agreed that the concerns warranted deeper discovery, granting access to records Toyota had previously shielded. And once discovery began, the legal fight uncovered something more damning than any mechanical defect. Hidden inside those confidential archives were files that revealed what Toyota never intended the world to see: the audit files. When auditors were granted access to Toyota's internal repositories, they found more than procedural errors or inconsistent reports. They discovered a layered archive of metadata trails, overwritten submissions, and version histories that revealed a deeper level of suppression. Several documents contained corrections that had been manually altered to remove references to stress failures identified during early development. Other files included risk assessments marked as for internal review only, detailing concerns about component durability that never appeared in official summaries submitted to regulators. One of the most striking revelations came from a series of reports that had been archived under obscure file names, nearly hidden within the system. These reports outlined unapproved design exceptions implemented to keep production schedules intact, despite unresolved engineering concerns. Forensic analysis indicated that multiple entries had been edited shortly before external review requests were issued, suggesting attempts to streamline the narrative presented to investigators and customers. Auditors also uncovered correspondence, indicating that some engineers attempted to escalate warnings, but were discouraged through procedural delays or redirected responsibilities. These messages painted a portrait of a company struggling internally with contradictions between engineering truth and corporate direction. The audit did not merely expose mistakes, it exposed intent, revealing how information had been compartmentalized to avoid accountability. As these findings emerged, financial analysts began recalculating Toyota's risk profile with growing alarm. Their reassessment would ignite a reaction far beyond the company's legal and regulatory battles. Investors watched the foundation shake. The financial world reacted with immediate intensity once the audit findings reached the market. Analysts, who once described Toyota as one of the most stable automotive investments, began issuing cautious advisories, warning that the unfolding scandal carried significant liabilities. Institutional investors reviewed the potential cost of litigation, regulatory penalties, warranty extensions, and reputational damage. As projections shifted, major funds quietly reduced their exposure, triggering a broader decline in market confidence. Pension managers grew particularly anxious, recognizing that their portfolios relied heavily on automakers traditionally perceived as low risk. With Toyota's credibility destabilized, retirees and long-term savers faced unexpected vulnerability. Mutual funds tracking automotive indices adjusted their positions as well, further amplifying the market reaction. Each downgrade created additional pressure, fueling speculation that the scandal represented not a temporary disruption, but a structural threat to Toyota's financial outlook. Public perception influenced trading behavior too. News outlets highlighted investor concerns, causing individual shareholders to reconsider their confidence in a company that had long symbolized reliability. As trading volumes surged, Toyota's valuation fluctuated sharply, reflecting uncertainty rather than resilience. Analysts debated how long the instability would last and whether Toyota could restore trust within the investment community. The financial tremors reached into global markets, affecting suppliers, partners, and competitors who relied on Toyota's stability as a cornerstone of the industry. And the panic spreading through Toyota's ecosystem would soon reshape the next stage of the crisis. Supply chain breakdown. Instability spread through Toyota's supply chain the moment partners realized the scandal carried legal and financial risks they could no longer ignore. Component vendors that had worked with the company for decades began reassessing their exposure, calculating how deeply the unfolding crisis might affect their own operations. Some suppliers demanded renegotiated contracts with higher risk premiums, arguing that the uncertainty surrounding Toyota's engines placed unfair liability on their shoulders. Others quietly paused shipments, unwilling to send critical materials until Toyota addressed the mounting inquiries from regulators and auditors. Logistics partners grew uneasy as delayed certification approvals threatened export schedules. Warehouses reported halted outbound transfers because vehicles awaiting clearance could not legally proceed to international markets. Several freight carriers requested revised timetables, wary of becoming entangled in compliance disputes. Even firms supplying raw metals and electronic components questioned whether Toyota could guarantee stable demand over the coming quarters. The result was a chain reaction of caution, layered upon caution. Production lines slowed as inventory gaps widened, creating internal bottlenecks that no amount of managerial intervention could disguise. Toyota had long thrived on finely tuned coordination with its suppliers, but that harmony began dissolving under the weight of corporate doubt and legal exposure. Partners were no longer reassured by Toyota's historical reliability. They were now guided by self-preservation. And as the supply chain tightened its grip, the pressure moved inevitably inward toward the heart of Toyota's workforce. Inside the plants, the human cost of the crisis began to erupt. Workers rise as confidence crumbles. Outrage took hold inside Toyota's factories as production slowdowns and supply shortages rippled across assembly lines. Workers who once took pride in the company's reputation now faced canceled shifts, unpredictable schedules, and rumors of future layoffs. The sense of betrayal ran deep, not because of a single misstep, but because employees believed leadership had concealed the instability that now threatened their livelihoods. Conversations in break rooms turned into organized discussions, and frustration grew louder with every missed deadline. Labor representatives reported an influx of grievances documenting unsafe working conditions tied to hurried adjustments in production plans. Managers struggled to maintain morale as crews questioned why warnings from engineers had been ignored, and why workers were the ones absorbing the consequences. Some departments saw walkouts during shift changes, while others witnessed spontaneous protests demanding transparency from upper management. The emotional toll was unmistakable. Veteran employees who had remained loyal through past challenges spoke openly about reconsidering their careers. Younger workers, uncertain about the company's future, pressed supervisors for assurances no one could honestly give. Toyota's culture, once defined by unity and trust, felt fractured as rumors of restructuring circulated among the ranks. And while Toyota attempted to stabilize internal operations, competitors outside the company saw an opportunity they had waited years to exploit. Those rivals attacked with a precision that would reshape the competitive landscape. If you want every new development as the fallout intensifies, make sure you subscribe right now. The situation is shifting fast, new evidence is emerging, and the next chapter in this story will reshape everything you thought you knew. Rivals attack. Opportunism surged across the industry as Toyota's competitors sensed a rare opening. Manufacturers that had long fought to chip away at Toyota's dominance launched one of the most calculated marketing offensives in automotive history. Ford rolled out campaigns highlighting proven powertrains and meticulous testing processes. Honda emphasized its legacy of steady engineering leadership. Hyundai showcased innovation paired with tightened quality controls. Several Chinese automakers accelerated their push into global markets, framing themselves as rising alternatives untouched by scandal. Fleet operators, who valued reliability above all else, responded quickly. Many canceled pending Toyota orders and shifted their contracts to rivals, promising stability and transparent service guarantees. This redirection of high-volume buyers signaled a seismic shift in market dynamics. Meanwhile, competitors' sales teams contacted suppliers previously aligned with Toyota, offering incentives to redirect production capacity toward their own expanding lines. Advertising became sharper and more targeted, without ever naming Toyota outright. Messages celebrated durability, long-term performance, and rigorous certification, themes that resonated strongly with consumers following the headlines. Social media campaigns amplified testimonials from satisfied drivers of rival brands, subtly contrasting them with the uncertainty surrounding Toyota's engines. This coordinated blitz was not merely opportunistic, it was transformative, marking a moment when rivals gained ground with unprecedented speed. Their surge added pressure to governments worldwide, prompting them to rethink the rules that governed the entire industry, the rulebook rewritten. International regulators moved swiftly once Toyota's crisis exposed how fragile existing oversight frameworks truly were. What had long been treated as a system built on trust was suddenly revealed as one dependent on voluntary disclosure and selective transparency. Governments across Asia, Europe, and North America responded with urgency, introducing proposals designed to fundamentally reshape how vehicles earned certification and remained on the road. Instead of relying on manufacturer-submitted summaries and internal assessments, regulatory agencies now demanded full access to granular, raw test data backed by independent third-party verification. Several nations implemented randomized compliance audits, allowing regulators to inspect vehicles already in circulation rather than only pre-approved models. These surprise checks were intended to catch discrepancies early before flawed designs could quietly pass into mass production. Testing standards expanded dramatically. Authorities mandated extended durability trials that simulated real-world usage far beyond previous requirements, alongside cross-laboratory validation to ensure consistency across testing facilities. Penalties for undocumented deviations became severe, ranging from massive fines to forced recalls and certification suspensions. The reforms did not stop at engines. Regulators widened their scope to include software calibration, emissions modeling, electronic system integrity, and data logging transparency. As vehicles grew increasingly software-dependent, authorities recognized that hidden code changes posed risks equal to mechanical defects. This shift marked one of the most sweeping regulatory overhauls the automotive industry had seen in decades. Automakers worldwide scrambled to upgrade testing facilities, retrain compliance teams, and overhaul documentation practices that had once been treated as routine paperwork. Toyota's downfall became a global case study, cited repeatedly in legislative debates as proof that transparency failures could destabilize not just a company, but entire markets. Industry leaders privately acknowledged that the era of lenient self-reporting had ended. What replaced it was mandatory oversight, continuous verification, and the expectation that manufacturers would be accountable long after vehicles left the factory floor. And as these new rules took hold, a powerful force outside corporate boardrooms and government chambers prepared to shape the next phase of the crisis. Consumers themselves were about to redefine the market in ways no automaker could ignore. The buyer awakens. Awakening spread across the consumer landscape faster than any automaker expected. For decades, buyers assumed major manufacturers would handle defects responsibly and transparently, but the Toyota scandal shattered that trust. Customers who once ignored fine print or accepted vague assurances began scrutinizing every detail of a vehicle purchase. From durability ratings to brand ethics, survey data revealed a dramatic shift. Reliability and honesty now outweighed pricing incentives or dealership promotions. Families who had been loyal to Toyota for generations openly questioned whether heritage could excuse concealed engineering risks. The emotional anchor that once secured brand devotion no longer held. Drivers sought clarity, demanding full disclosure on testing procedures, component origins, and long-term maintenance expectations. Dealerships reported that buyers were now arriving with annotated research and lists of questions that challenged traditional sales tactics. Online communities became hubs of information sharing, where consumers compared experiences and tracked manufacturer behavior with unprecedented focus. Vehicles were no longer evaluated solely on horsepower or interior features. They were judged as reflections of corporate integrity. This transformation changed the balance of power. Automakers realized that the modern buyer could not be pacified with polished marketing or mechanical jargon. Transparency became a survival requirement rather than an optional virtue. And as consumer behavior evolved, global markets began shifting in response to this new demand for accountability. Those shifts would reshape international trade patterns and redefine which manufacturers held influence. The global realignment. A global realignment followed as Toyota's collapse disrupted long-established trade flows and market hierarchies. Nations that once relied heavily on Toyota, imports began diversifying their automotive portfolios, seeking manufacturers that projected confidence and operational stability. Domestic brands in several regions experienced sudden surges in demand as national consumers prioritized homegrown companies perceived as less vulnerable to hidden defects. Meanwhile, international competitors capitalized on the vacuum by strengthening their footholds in territories where Toyota had long maintained dominance. Trade analysts observed sharp fluctuations in export volumes as distributors renegotiated supply agreements and reconsidered long-term commitments. Some markets that traditionally favored Japanese engineering redirected their loyalty toward South Korean or European manufacturers. Others opened their doors to emerging automakers from developing economies eager to expand globally. The ripple effects extended beyond sales figures, influencing currency movements, shipping routes, and investment flows tied to automotive production. These shifts sparked new alliances between governments and manufacturers, with several countries offering incentives to attract production facilities and reduce reliance on a single foreign supplier. In regions where Toyota once served as an anchor for industrial ecosystems, policymakers rushed to stabilize local supply chains weakened by uncertainty. This evolving landscape introduced a level of unpredictability unseen in decades, creating opportunities and risks in equal measure. That instability soon escalated into political conflict, turning the automotive fallout into a matter of national sovereignty. Political blowback. Confrontation erupted across political arenas as governments recognized the scandal's implications for national security, economic independence, and industrial credibility. Legislative bodies launched inquiries into how such a failure escaped detection for so long, and whether foreign manufacturers posed systemic risks to domestic markets. Hearings broadcast across multiple nations placed Toyota under intense scrutiny, with officials demanding explanations for the concealment of engineering inconsistencies that had endangered consumers and disrupted economic stability. Some countries used the scandal to justify new protectionist policies, framing their actions as safeguarding national sovereignty in an era of globalized manufacturing. Import restrictions tightened, and tariffs were adjusted to favor local automakers positioned as safer and more transparent alternatives. Diplomatic tensions rose as Japan defended Toyota's legacy, while other governments argued that accountability extended beyond corporate boundaries. Political leaders used the crisis to push industrial revitalization and reduce reliance on fragile global supply webs, while others advanced electric vehicle expansion with aggressive incentives. The response quickly moved beyond speeches, reshaping treaties, partnerships, and trade negotiations. The automotive sector became a geopolitical instrument rather than a simple market. And as governments clashed over the future of mobility, a deeper question emerged about what the industry would look like in the years ahead. That question set the stage for a future defined more by uncertainty than by tradition. What the post-Toyota era really looks like. Uncertainty dominated the conversation as analysts attempted to outline what the automotive world would become after Toyota's fall. The scandal forced manufacturers to rethink not only engineering standards, but also the ethical framework guiding technological advancement. Trust, once assumed, now required verification. Companies began adopting independent auditing systems, real-time data transparency tools, and artificial intelligence models designed to detect irregularities before they reached production. The future of mobility shifted toward accountability-driven innovation rather than unchecked expansion. Artificial intelligence systems used for quality assurance became more sophisticated, cross-referencing live test data with historical performance trails to prevent concealed defects. Ethical compliance teams gained influence within corporate structures, ensuring that engineering decisions aligned with long-term safety rather than quarterly targets. Consumers played a defining role in this evolution, demanding vehicles that demonstrated integrity through measurable, verifiable standards. The industry shifted as smaller automakers united around shared verification systems, while larger manufacturers poured resources into predictive modeling and continuous vehicle monitoring backed by government networks. Transparency became mandatory, yet uncertainty persisted. The collapse of a global giant rewrote the rules, and the transformation remains unfinished. This is only the beginning, with new revelations already forming on the horizon. This story isn't over, and what comes next may be even more unsettling. If these revelations matter to you, make sure you like this video, subscribe for upcoming updates, and comment below with your thoughts or experiences.